Welcome to Creative Generations podcast. Today we have another episode in our series, The Art of Becoming, where we talk to Artistic Director of Smuin Ballet, Amy Seiwert. If you like this episode, visit our Instagram and YouTube channel. You can also go to our website at creativegenerations-dance.com. And for more information on Smuin Ballet, go to smuinballet.org.
What is Creative Generations? What makes it so unique, so needed? And what do we do? An organization created by dancers, we are a team of professional dancers and top wellness experts in dance nutrition and mind-body health who are fully dedicated to helping you thrive. Join Creative Generations and immediately have your own team of mentors and experts supporting you.
And I feel like there's a void in the dance world that no one wants to talk about, and this program is that, if that makes sense. Even if you're perfectly fine, there's still like podcasts you can listen to that you can experience breath work. Like there's always something to work on, even if you are in a good spot.
Amy Seiwert, welcome to the Creative Generations podcast. You are a former dancer with Sacramento Ballet and Smuin Ballet, and the former artistic director of Sacramento Ballet and the current artistic director of Smuin. Thank you so much for being here.
It's my pleasure.
Yeah, so we are, Jamie and I are going to talk with you today. We're doing this series where we've been talking with artistic directors, and not only about the role and how that differs from person to person and company to company and style to style, but we also want to get an insight into the hiring process, the auditioning process for our younger dancers out there, our mentees that we work with, just to kind of pull that curtain back a little bit. There are tons of questions out there from young people, and I think, you know, this series has been really great for people and really important to talk about. Before we get into that, though, we always like to start, just ask, you know, how did you get involved with dance, and how and when did that become your career? Did you know that was going to be your career?
So my journey into ballet was maybe not super traditional, mainly because I didn't want to do it. It was a different time where, as a child, we didn't really have a choice, and I idolized my sister, older sister, who was a gymnast. So I wanted to be a gymnast because she was. And I had a very like scrawny arms. I was so tiny and thin, and you know, I was flexible, but by the time it got to like doing back handsprings, I would pretty much just land on my head every time because I didn't have the strength. And my sister and I were both told, you're going to take ballet, it will help with your gymnastics. And I cried. I was like, it's pink, it's girly. I was a tomboy. I was like, I didn't see, like, you know, it's funny to me because I think I was 6. And the 6-year-old Amy, who probably had never even seen a ballet, had a total idea of what ballet was.
Yeah.
And that it wasn't for me. Absolutely not for me. And I went to my first class, and, you know, we got to run and jump and, you know, music and and it was so much fun, and I was hooked immediately. But, you know, I've always had this kind of personal mission to change people's preconceptions of this art form. And it's because as a 6-year-old, I certainly had my preconceptions of the art form. So I don't think as most dancers, just got more and more intense through high school, everything else. And just pretty single focused on it from probably age 12 on.
Yeah. How did, your career in dance then kind of shift into the idea of becoming a director?
I was very fortunate. I went to a performing arts high school in Cincinnati, And because of that, we got to choreograph. We had, my friends were dancers, I had studio space available to me. And if I created something, it was going to be done on the, spring showcase kind of thing. So I early on started working with choreography. And I think when you're a dancer, your focus is myopic. Has to be, right? So it's you are focused on what is going to best prepare you for your day in the rehearsal studio, how you're going to peak at 8 o'clock at night for that show that you're doing, how you're going to recover. Everything is about how you are going to best perform as an artist and as a technician. As a choreographer, your lens opens and you have to focus on the people in front of you and how are they going to most thrive, because you're in this collaborative process, right? So what can you give them? So you've gone from really narrow lens, expanding it out a little bit. And as I've gotten older, I've really wanted to be of service to this field, to the art form that I love so much. And I felt like directing, which I was kind of doing even before Sacramento with my own company in San Francisco Imagery, which was really a summer pickup company. I'd been doing that since around 2011. And taking those values and taking a lot of what we were building at Imagery on a small scale and blowing that up was super exciting to me as an opportunity. So to be able to, again, open that lens even wider and be like, how can I influence this field that I love so much and sometimes has things in it that aren't that great, and how can I change that? How can I influence that? So being of service is what's really enticing to me as a director.
That's really beautiful. I really appreciate that perspective. And it sounds like you've always been sort of groundbreaking in like the way that you think about dance ever since your preconceived notions at 6. Yeah. And the wanting to change the way that it's thought about or received or seen. And that sounds like it carries all the way through to directorship. And I think one of those preconceived notions is that there is not a path for a female to directorship, but obviously that's changing. You are in a directorship position and have been in a few different places. There are other female directors around now, and that's new. And I was wondering what kind of challenges you found on that road, if any of them related to you being a female specifically, or if this is just a difficult journey for an artist in general to get into a leadership space.
I mean, yes. I mean, the leadership positions they're few and far between. So it's not an easy road for anyone. I think I'd have to look up the years on this, and I don't know them off the top of my head, but there was a time, I want to say late 90s, early ooze, where I was interviewed for an article with the New York Times on why there were no female choreographers in ballet. And then they did another article like 7 years later, and it had a different title, but it was the same article. Why are there no female choreographers in ballet? And someone asked me, they're like, well, why weren't you interviewed? I'm like, because I was interviewed for the one, 5 years earlier that was really the exact same thing. I remember in 2012, I did a summer project here in San Francisco that was all women choreographers. It was myself, Julia Adam, and Gina Patterson. And I had put forward the premise that there were a lack of women in leadership positions in ballet. And the head writer for the San Francisco Chronicle at the time was Alan Ulrich, who is no longer with us. And Alan was he was a curmudgeon. He grumpy. He really would tell you exactly what he thought and write it. But he and I always had a pretty, a good relationship. And so I'm being interviewed and he's like, I don't believe your premise, and I was like, okay, Alan. And I danced 19 years as a professional. I mean, that's like, I always say that, and dancer years are like dog years. That means I was like 110 when I retired. Like, it's a really long career. I was very, very lucky. And in that time, in 19 years, on a main stage, I danced one piece by a woman. And I said that to him, and it made him stop and made him look at it. And he's like, okay. So I kind of opened the door to the conversation that he really didn't believe it. He was like, there's Monica Mason, and I forget who, I think Lord S was the other person, Karen Kane. But he's like, there's Monica Mason, there's Karen Kane. There are women leaders. I'm like, two, yeah, that you brought up. But when I came back from that, I went to, my assistant at the time was Joseph Copley. He's now over at ODC. And I told him, I was like, we need stats. I was like, and he went on Gold Star, and he looked up every company with a budget over $5 million. And he looked up their programming for the year and found out, I think it was maybe 17% of the work was by women. And then it's funny because we published that. By that I mean we put it on social media, and so many major companies picked it up and started. I remember being in Cincinnati Ballet doing a piece, and their writer was like, "What do you think about this stat? That only I was like, "Where'd you get that stat?" He's like, "Oh, Cincinnati Ballet gave it to me." I was like,
that's my
stat. I was like, "Cool." Like, it's, again, we talk about the ripple effect, right? You throw that stone in the water, and like those ripples keep going out and out and out and out. So it's taken, so back to your original question, it has taken so long for the conversation about leadership, about who gets to be in the front of the room choreographing, who gets to be making those curatorial decisions, and that there needs to be more voices at the table. There has, I think, been a huge generational shift. And I do think when I look at, the women that are dancing that I'm working with now at Smuin, like they're not dealing with that. And, they grew up with very different images of these, stronger female heroes in the movies that you see when you're young, all this kind of stuff. So I think they're inheriting a very different world, and I'm very grateful for that. But man, it took a long time to move that needle.
Yeah, I think you're right. And that it's a very, like, if you can see it, you can be it sort of thing. But for you, you didn't see it. So was that something that was just intrinsically inside of you? Or how did you come to it?
I think in a way I did see it. I have the arts are very important in my family. I come from a long line of music and piano teachers on both sides. My aunt, who is still with us, she was a Broadway dancer, tapper. I can't tap, but she was a tapper, and she assisted Gower Champion on 42nd Street. And Gower actually passed away on opening night of 42nd Street. So she and another gentleman were in charge of taking care of that musical, its entire run, which I think was about a decade, and staging this all over the world. And so when I was young, I remember I got to sit in with her on an audition. When she was auditioning people, I got to sit on the stairs with her when she was taking notes for a show once, so, and it wasn't the ballet world, very different aesthetic, very different style, but I did see a woman leading that stuff from a very young age. So I don't think it occurred to me you couldn't do it.
That's amazing. I like that you were able to make that like small hop from like one kind of dance or one kind of performance to ballet, and they weren't like two completely isolated experiences. That's awesome.
Yeah, it sounds like your aunt was in some ways kind of a mentor, or at least a role model, that image that you needed to see. Was there anybody else along the way that kind of took you under their wing? Or you mentioned the female choreographers today and how it's a different path, and I imagine you are sort of that role to them. Was there anybody for you that kind of filled that?
Well, I mean, Michael Smuin was amazing to me. He, um, again, I have a very different choreographic style from him. He thought I was weird, and I was like, cool. Like, and he thought that was cool. So I was like, all right, whatever you want to call it. But he gave me so many opportunities, and a lot of them while I was still dancing. He would give me a leave of absence from the company to go do a project. I remember one time asking to be let go for something, and he just said, "Is it important?" And I said, "Yes." He's like, "We'll make it work." And he would call other directors about me, things like that. So I was very fortunate, that I had a male artistic director open those doors as wide as he could for me. And I mean, I cannot possibly overstate the effect he had on my career, and be able to like sit in this office right now and in this building that has his name on it. It very much feels like a lineage and a legacy that I'm just very grateful for.
That's great. I mean, I don't work for you. I haven't worked for you, but I would imagine that, just in these few minutes of talking to you, that you also carry that to your dancers as well.
She's awesome. Yes. I can say personally, I have worked with Amy briefly, and the environment in the studio is wonderful.
Thanks, Jamie. Yeah, we have that.
Yeah. So, speaking of a former director, it kind of leads us to one of our topics. What qualities or attributes do you look for in dancers that you want to bring into Smuin or you want to work with? And, is that shaped by certain things that your previous directors would look for, and that kind of maybe molded your ideas and opinions? Or is it, stuff that you felt like were important to you as a dancer and you see that in someone else? How is that shaped for you, and what are you looking for?
I think it's predominantly shaped by my experiences as a choreographer, because while you're not auditioning for a company, when you're doing that, every time I go into a new environment, say I have a commission somewhere and I'm going in there, the minute I start working with those dancers, you're looking to see who's going to thrive in your process, who's curious, who's creative, who has solid technique to pull these ideas off. But I'm a huge believer in that the conditions that we have, I mean, they affect what we can do, right? And we create those conditions together. So how do we create the conditions where the art is going to thrive? So you might be the strongest partner or quote best dancer, but if you are not curious and you don't really care about the creation of new work, like we're not going to have a good relationship together. Right? So I'm looking for the dancer who wants to be in that process with me, who is willing to be vulnerable in that process with me, so I in turn can be vulnerable and we can really explore. Like creation, when you're creating a new work, you don't know what's going to exist, right? So it's an intensely vulnerable process, right? And if everyone's going to dive into that together, there has to be so much trust. So I do bring those values with me when I'm also looking to audition for a company, and especially with Smuin, because we do so much new work and so many world premieres. You're not just learning ballets that have been taught for the last 100 years. So
yeah. So it seems just by that answer, it seems like a dancer's attitude and ability to collaborate is really important. Yes. Would you elaborate on that a little bit? Not only in the choreographic process, but someone who is auditioning and trying to assimilate to a new company? And
Yeah, it's so I'm gonna tie it back to surfing. I am I'm not a good surfer, but man, I love it. And but the conditions matter, right? Like, so you can't just be like, I'm going to go surf today at 4 o'clock. Like, you need to know what the conditions are going to be. You need to, and the conditions that might be great for you are not good for me. Like, I know if my surf coach is really excited about the conditions, I should be terrified. Yeah, so every room's not the same for every person. So, we talked a little bit about trust. Like, the trust is so important. And I feel like as a dancer, you need to trust the person in the front of the room. And there are so many reasons you might not. Like, it might be that the repertory doesn't feel good on your body and you're not confident you're going to look good on stage. It could be it's the type of work you're just not that interested in doing. It could be that maybe the work feels great, but your moral compass is very different than the person in the front of the room, right? So there could be a multitude of reasons that you don't have that trust. But if you don't have that trust, we're not going to get to that vulnerability place, right? We're not going to get to the collaborative point. So I've told, like, when I lecture on this, sometimes it's like, you need it, trust the person in the front of the room. And if you don't trust the person in the front of the room, you're in the wrong room. Find the room for you, right? Like, every play, like, you could be a brilliant dancer, but if it's not the right environment, not the right conditions, no one's going to thrive. Find the right room for you. And that's hard. And of course, everyone wants to be like, all the rooms are right for me. And that's just, it's not the way it works.
So how do you find that coming across in people, like let's say in an audition process? What is it? What's a maybe body language, or what is a good tell for this person is going to be open, trusting, vulnerable in a class structure? Like, do you audition with teaching rep or something like that? And that's a good way to tell. Like, how do you discover that in the audition process?
Yeah, it's I'm fresh off this. We just did one of our auditions Sunday, so 4 days ago. We're a small company and we don't have a ton of turnover. So we do ask people to apply to audition. So they should be sending in work samples that one of our rehearsal directors reviews through all of those. And we're looking at people that we know stylistically, we're seeing something we're like, okay, that's going to kind of match with our repertory. We don't want people spending resources to come and audition if we're like 90% sure they're not the right fit, or maybe not the fit for us right now. They could be gorgeous, but this is, we know we need this type of dancer right now, and that's not what we're looking for. So, we never charge for auditions. We never have. Like, it's resources are so limited. So we want to make sure that if we're looking at them, we're truly interested. And that means we usually have somewhere between 25 and 30 people in an audition process. So it's not a cattle call. It's not 100 people that you're never going to be able to see anyone. We do a traditional class, and then we do some rep, and then we do some partnering, and the whole process takes about 4 hours. So it's a long audition. It really does. Like, I might see someone at bar where I'm like, oh yeah, that's it. And then you start seeing them in rep. You're like, oh, they don't actually move the way, how they're moving. Their classroom technical chops are great for that, but they're not pulling that over to how they do rep. Body language is a huge thing. You see someone working with their partner, and then, you might see like a woman just go into I'm going into this lift. And it's like, you didn't even check out to see if your partner was there behind you for that. So, like, how people are communicating both verbally and non-verbally. You get a lot of information from all of that.
That's great. 4 hours. That's awesome. No, I mean that. I mean, you really get a chance to see people. I think.
Yeah. And, also it's, uh, I mean, we don't always get it right, but you're trying so hard, especially if you're going to ask someone to like take a chance on you and come and maybe move to this new city and do everything else. They'll leave wherever they were. We're going to do everything in our power to make sure that's a good fit.
Yeah. So as a more contemporary company, when you get these video submissions for people that are applying to audition, you mentioned a little bit, but could you talk a little more specifically about what you're looking for on the actual video? Would you want to see performance footage? Would you want to see improvisation? Would you want to see, I mean, just how would you want the video to be prepared for your audition process?
Yeah, we have pretty like straightforward guidelines on our website on what we're asking to see. Ideally, we're seeing some performance footage, but not everyone has it, right? Maybe your company won't allow it to go out, or things like that. But we are a company where we're looking for solid ballet technique. We need double tours, we need solid turns on point work, we need solid point work. But then we also need you to be able to drop your weight and stomp around in sneakers, right? So finding those dancers who can cross over and live in those two worlds organically. And that's what we're looking for. So and we don't need like, again, everyone, sometimes people send you a video and it's 20 minutes long. And I'm like, we're looking at 200 videos. Like no one's going to watch all of that. So I would encourage folks to send in the stuff. Only do not send anything that looks less than brilliant, right? Especially if you're recording in a studio and you fell out of a pirouette. I'm like, you could have done that again. Film it again. We don't know how many times you filmed it. But could put your most astounding foot forward. We had someone send in 3 beautifully classical variations, but nothing contemporary. And it's like, I mean, that was gorgeous. Can you do this other thing? We still don't know.
Yeah.
I would also highly, highly recommend to dancers, chapter your video or tag it or give me a timestamp. But, because people, if you don't, we're kind of needle dropping, which I guess that doesn't mean anything to young people anymore. But we're just jumping around. And again, you want to control what we see, right? So, show me contemporary as, this variation starts at 3:05, and at 3:05, don't just show me 10 seconds of you walking. Like, show me the most amazing thing of that moment.
Yeah, so you touched on it a little bit, but for a dancer that does come from a very classical background and they are looking to transition or try their hand at a more contemporary company, what advice would you give them other than actually showing you their contemporary movement? But it could be so small as how their resume is formed. Should they put in workshops they've taken? What's the difference between that background versus the contemporary background, and what are you looking for a dancer that's coming from that classical background?
Yeah, I mean, the video is the most important. From your video is where I'm going to go to your resume. So, even if you don't have experience and you don't have a performance video of you doing something contemporary, if you have something brilliant in a studio, that's going to make me stand up and take notice. And then I might look at that resume, and then, I might see that you did a workshop with BalletX or with, the lines program. And then I might reach out to that person and be like, hey, I see this person was here. How did they work together? What was their vibe like? Yeah. So again, the video is first for me. I'm sure everyone's different.
Yeah.
And with that resume, often I'm looking, if I'm really interested, by the time I'm looking at your resume, I'm seeing like who do I have a relationship that I can call and find out how this person was in process.
you kind of spoke about it before when you mentioned, if you're commissioned for work and you come into a new environment and you have to kind of read the room and assess the situation. And just wondering if you have advice for dancers out there that are trying to assimilate to maybe a new company. Maybe they are a classical dancer that is coming into a more contemporary company, or if they are on the more contemporary side and they're going more job to job kind of contract work. Just how do you have advice on how you can present yourself, how you can acclimate, how you can form into these new environments?
I would say know you have a choice and be thoughtful about it. And what I mean by that, there was a woman, brilliant, brilliant dancer and artist. And she had auditioned for me at Sacramento. And I had known her as a young dancer, and legs and feet and this beautiful Vaganova training. And she came to the audition. She had short hair and ponytails, leotard, gym shorts, and hadn't shaved her legs for a very long time. And my rehearsal director at the time was like, what's going on there? And to me, I was like, that is her telling us exactly who she is. And I am in, because I appreciate that individuality right there. So that worked for me. It would not have worked for him. Like, it's like if it had all been his choice, she probably would have been cut. So he was looking for someone who could assimilate more. I was looking for that personality. So you have a choice to present yourself very neutral, so that whoever's in the front of the room can kind of put their idea on you, or you have that choice to be like, this is who I unapologetically am and who I want to be. And that might appeal to that person who's like, yeah, that's what I'm looking for. Let's work together. Don't, if you're trying to be neutral, make sure you're not being neutral. I guess is what I'm saying. So know the choices you're making and be aware of them, be cognizant of them. Remember that everyone in the front of the room has their own pet peeves. For me, it's yawning, open mouth yawning. Jamie probably remembers. I've not cast someone because they were yawning in class. And it's not because they were a bad dancer, but I was like, I can't look at that for the next 3 weeks, because every time I see it, it's going to take me out of my process. Someone else I remember being in, like, it was a group audition process, and there was a dancer who asked a lot of questions, and this other woman was like, that's too many questions for me. I need a dancer who's going to ask too few questions, or fewer questions. So I know I don't know how public this one is, so I'm not going to name names or companies, but I remember talking to a rehearsal director once, and they were at big audition, probably 200 people in the room, and the director saying, there are too many people. I can't see anyone. Anyone who messes up this next combination, meaning misses the structure of it, I'm going to cut. Again, not my measuring stick, but was theirs in that moment. So, know that we all bring our baggage to the table, and you don't want to cut yourself out inadvertently.
Yeah. No, I mean, I remember, I'm not going to name the company, but I remember auditioning for a summer program 20 plus years ago. And it was one of those deals where you stand in the center and you do a tendu side, and then they cut based on that. And I was cut way before that. But I had friends that were cut there. And yeah, I mean, it's like you said, it's everybody's own thing. But I think, what you did mention is that that idea of being open, and if you're going to be yourself, be yourself. But if you're going to be neutral, be neutral.
Yeah. And again, it's a choice, right?
Yeah.
Everyone, and to be honest with yourself about what you want in the company that you're going for.
Yeah. So you had a 19-year performing career. You've been director at a few different places. how have your expectations for dancers changed? And how do you see this new generation of dancers, choreographers? What is your outlook on that?
I would say I do love how much more collaborative people are in process now.
Hmm.
I can tell you in 19 years, so I was never asked to improv once. And then there was a time where if you did ask people to improv, they'd be like, I remember choreographing on Friends, like it was a summer thing I was doing, and everyone in the room was a peer that I was dancing with, and I was like, okay, we're gonna take that phrase and everyone manipulate off of it and something. And one of my friends was like, grabbed her bag and left the room. She's like, that's not what I do. That was probably 20 years ago, easy. And now I think that training is, we're taught it more in the school program. So it's not as foreign. And I see dancers not afraid to make choices, right? There's so much in the ballet paradigm that's, the training when you're young is so codified for a reason. We're trying to mold those bodies when they are malleable. And there's not a lot of choice making. There's you do it this way, right? So I think there's something in our training that is very much about right versus wrong, conformity versus individuality, especially for the women, because there's usually 8 million of them and 2 boys, and those boys, it's like, oh, wear whatever you want. It's like, for the women, no, your hair is going to be like this and this and this and this, right? So I would say even 10 years ago, I would work with younger dancers and there was a fear of making a choice, because what if they chose the wrong? They just wanted to be right. I want to make the right choice. I'm like, we're not judging the choices right now. We're just making them. And I don't see that as much anymore. And that's super refreshing. And just the idea that, there's a great quote. It's was from Gordon Moore, who was the co-founder of Intel. And he said, if everything you do is working, you're not trying hard enough. So that in the creative process, we need to be able to try things that won't work, but maybe that experiment leads us to the next thing, right? So we need to be able to, again, that's why I talk about trust, vulnerability. We need to be able to go to the places where we might be a little lost and uncomfortable to get to the next thing.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And that made me think of a teacher one time that was giving corrections, and she said that, if the correction feels weird or different, it's probably good, because what you were doing before was not good.
Yeah.
So I think that's along the same lines. Like, if everything's working, everything's clicking, then you're probably missing something. There's probably something you could be doing more of, something you could pay a little bit more attention to. No, that's great. Speaking of the current generation, what are your feelings about social media and how that's affected the dance world? And then a second to that, would you ever reach out to a dancer via social media, or do you think that's important to you? If a dancer has a great following and a great content on their social media, is that even on your radar?
Not really. For my own mental health, I try to limit how much I'm on the social channels, and when I am on it, it is usually for work. But it's those channels steal a lot of my time, and so I've had to make sure that I don't allow that to happen for me. So I mean, a little bit sometimes when you're like, oh, I'm interested in this one dancer, again, I don't find a dancer on social media, but if they are, they're auditioning for us, and they might have clips of them dancing up there that we might check out, but it's not the resource I use first. But I'm also older.
Yeah, I think we talked to a director that mentioned that someone had sent them a message on some social media platform, and they just said, hey, thank you so much. Go to our website, submit a video that way. And I think that's probably the common answer.
Yeah.
So with your company, how do you foster diversity and inclusion, and not only with the dancers that you hire, but with the choreographers you bring in, with the work that you do, with the composers you work with, the lighting designers, everything? How's your organization fostering diversity and inclusion?
Yeah, it's again just I do believe the world is richer when we have more voices at the table. I remember eons ago listening to an interview with a female DJ who was curating this huge festival somewhere in England. And they're like, you always have such a diverse roster. How do you do it? She's like, easy. I make a list and I look at it. So just like make it a goal.
Yeah.
Don't curate a season of all men. I also wouldn't curate a season of all women. It's just like I'm looking at the people, the voices that I want to give opportunity to, and just making sure that I'm not only looking in the same place. There are so many fantastic choreographers out there whose work is underrepresented.
That's great. Yeah, you don't want to keep going back to the same well.
Right. And it's easy to, in a way, because also like if you know that choreographer, they're great, it's easy to go back to them again and again. And it's like, for example, like right now at Smuin, we have a great relationship with Val Caniparoli, and I love Val. And Val has, he's certainly been a mentor to me through the years. But I was like, Val, I've got 3 ballets of yours in rep right now. Like I'm not going to be calling you like this year. So,
Yeah.
but that, doesn't mean I don't love his work and, greatly appreciate him as an artist.
Yeah, it's like when my daughter's like, why can't Christmas be every day? Like, I didn't appreciate it as much. No, that's great. Do you, with your dancers and with the people you work with, do you take any steps to encourage them to ensure longevity in this career? Do you give them advice on how to stay healthy, both mentally and physically? And do you also encourage people to take steps for life after performing? And if there is a career transition there, are you all for that with your dancers, or is that a topic that you're like not so comfortable with?
It depends on my relationship with the dancer. And again, I've been in this role at this organization for like 7 months. So, not terribly long, although I've had a 25-year relationship with the company, right?
Yeah.
So I think having those honest conversations about like what's next for you, how can we support that? We've had dancers here do the LEAP program, which is the Liberal Education for Arts Professionals through St. Mary's College. But it's like every once in a while that class will conflict with rehearsal. And it's like, can we get you out of that rehearsal so you can still go do your class on Zoom? Supporting that type of work that they're doing. So that, everyone's got to think of what's next. Like,
Yeah.
So that we can support that. We are revamping our physical therapy protocols here. The dancers here have a monthly stipend to use however they want, whether that's for a gym or massage or something. And someone's like, could I use it for basically sports psychology coaching? We're like, absolutely. Like if that's what you think, this stipend is yours to, help you thrive, right? So if that's what you're feeling you need, then do it, right? So trying to build those bridges I will say personally, I was extremely fortunate. When I moved to San Francisco, there were a few artists and all in different companies. Like Greg Dawson was with Lines, Brian Fisher with ODC, Galina Alexandrova was, I think she was doing opera company at that time, SF Opera at that time. But they were all a little bit older than me. And we'd all be, especially during the summers, and like open class together. And these people never marked. They always finished class. And like, I mean, Greg Dawson, like to this day, like he would just leave his soul on the floor in class, like constantly. And it was this aha moment of like these people are having such beautiful longevity in their careers and how they're building that endurance. And
Yeah.
And to this day, like those three were major inspirations for me in terms of how to last in the industry.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it comes back to you have to enjoy it.
Right. That is a good plan.
Yeah, when we spoke with Dwight Roden, and he mentioned that among many other things, but you have to love what you do, and I think that carries you through the peaks and valleys. Well, if you were to speak to a young dancer right now who's looking to get a job, what advice would you give them? How to put themselves out there, how to put their best foot forward. Is there anything that you would say to someone right now who's in this audition season?
Yeah. Oh, so many things. I'll say two. One is, again, be honest with yourself, what you really want. Do you really want to be in a huge company with a big name where you might not be dancing a ton? Or is it more important to you to get as much stage time as you want? So you might go for a smaller company where you're going to get more opportunity, right? What type of work do you want to be doing? Or like, not all jobs are the same, right? Is it worth taking a job that does the rep you want to do, but the salary is maybe a little lower, or the salary is higher, but it's not the rep you want to do? And there's no right answer. Be honest with yourself on which one's more important. And once you assess that, keep checking in with it, because your values might change over time and what you want might change over time. So I got great advice once from Cookie Ruiz, who's the ED over at Ballet Austin. She said to me once, write down your values and look at it every day.
Yeah.
Right. So know what, self-identify what your core values are, and then see, like, does this company match them? I want that company. I'm going to do everything I can to get in that company. And then part two on the advice is that it might not work out. And you might get your heart broken. I've gotten my heart broken many times in my journey here. And it's always worked out. So, just when you have those moments, that there might be another opportunity that you would never have gotten to another way, had that heartbreak not happened. So just know that it will pass. Stay true to your core values and keep moving forward.
That's beautiful. That made me think of, I had a friend tell me when I was looking to get a tattoo, he said, put the tattoo somewhere, like the picture of it, where you can see it every day. And if you still love it after 6 months, then, go and get it.
You can get it.
I think that's true, like you said, for your values. I mean, they might change over time, but I think it's important to remind yourself of what's important to you, because, you can be swayed in so many different directions.
Right.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
Yeah, I do, talking about loving what you do. I do have this, I said these dancers have all heard me say it. Everyone should like their job 80% of the time.
Hmm.
There is always going to be a moment where you're like, this part of the job I don't want to do, whether that's, dealing with, for me as a artist, like in director role, I sit at this computer way more than I would like. My good day is when I'm in there. I'm on this machine more than I want to be. It's part of the job, right? As a dancer, you might, one day you're doing the dream rep, featured role, everything you ever wanted. The next piece you're doing, you're underutilized and you're not really digging the process, right? It's going to happen. It's never going to be brilliant all the time.
Yeah.
But you should love it 80% of the time.
On that note, it's interesting that you brought that up. I was going to ask you if there were ever moments in your career as a dancer, as a choreographer, as a director, any of it, where, you felt a lull and like questioned if you were still in the right place, and how did you work through that moment?
Yes, absolutely. I do believe that's part of the human experience. I'm pretty sure no matter what you do, especially if you're passionate about it for a living, you're going to have those, again, the hills and valleys. How do you come back to it? I've been fortunate in the times that where things maybe weren't working or weren't clicking or super challenging for whatever reason, that I've been met with a process soon after that was incredibly rewarding. So in those moments, again, where perhaps your heart was broken or about something, or just an incredibly trying creative process, or a creative process that didn't work. I mean, you put your heart and soul into this ballet and it goes on stage and it goes, they're not all brilliant successes, right? We wish they were. But so often those have been followed with ones that sang and fill your soul and keep you going. So trusting that process, I've never sped downhill for so long that I didn't feel like I could recover from it. And if I did, I would change course, and that would be okay. The world is big and beautiful and there are a zillion things that are fabulous in it. So I think you need to find those moments that make you go, oh, wow, and, inspire you. If you're not having those and what you do something else, right? Get the, oh, wow, however it is. But again, if we all walked through the world inspired, like it would be a better place.
Thank you for listening to our conversation with Smuin Ballet Artistic Director Amy Seiwert. If you enjoyed this episode, please follow us on Instagram and YouTube. You can also visit our website at creativegenerations-dance.com. And for more information on Smuin Ballet, go to smuinballet.org.